Welcome to another episode of Discograffiti's wildly in-depth Beach Boys series, and your dreams come true, where Brian Wilson freaks like you and me get our chance to delve deep into the barely believable history and prodigious discography of my favorite band of all time, and also coincidentally the best, along with a slew of top-shelf guests ranging from musicians inspired by their work, family members, documentary directors, songwriting collaborators, Beach Boys authors, producers, touring band members, and for good measure, some of the Beach Boys themselves. I'm your host, Dave Gebroe. Special thanks goes out to Jeff McAvoy and especially co-producer Dennis Dykin, without whom this series would not have happened. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Muscle Beach Party and the incredibly truncated film career of the Beach Boys. Psst. All right, guys, we're back with His Eminence, Domenic Priore, making another esteemed appearance in the hallowed halls of Discograffitiville. When you and I first talked, Dom, you told me, front and center, that when this thing gets off the ground, that you really want to do a whole special episode that's only dedicated to Muscle Beach Party. And I said, fine, let's do it. So Correct. Talk to me, because I really see this as your episode. Talk to me about its importance and give me the context too.
Well, like we talked about in the Surfin' USA episode, if it wasn't for that album, there would not be 40 beach party movies that followed up. I mean, this was an enigma, this idea of California, the sunshine, dancing with girls at night, at the beach and things like that. Bikinis and swim trunks and surfboards. All of that stuff had this national appeal, and it actually goes back before the Beach Boys because there's that movie Gidget from 1959. That was a big hit and was a great movie. And it was the first thing to touch on surfing in any culture. And then in 1960, the movie Where the Boys Are came out. And that was a tremendous, mainstream hit, it wasn't just a teenager's hit. So by 1963, when the Beach Boys came out with Surfin' USA, the American International Pictures, jumped on any teenage trend they could, just said, okay, let's get the teen idol singer Frankie Avalon and get him with Disney's Nat Funicello, and we'll have a hit combination here. And that was the romantic couple that did 6 movies together, I think. And then all the other studios just jumped in. But the first one was Beach Party. That was Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello with Bob Cummings was the main comedian on the show. And Gary Usher and Roger Christian were asked to write the songs for that because American International wanted Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys to write them. But they couldn't get Brian because he was on the road with the Beach Boys. So the guys who wrote the songs with Brian got used. So with Muscle Beach Party, Brian was back off the road, and now he's in the studio with Gary Usher and Roger Christian. They're writing songs, they're producing tracks, and at this point, it's the same era that Brian is also in the recording studio doing Shutdown Volume 2. So he's starting to use the Wrecking Crew. He's starting to use Steve Douglas and Jay Migliore, the horn section, making these big rock and roll backing tracks. And it's a pretty great recording, and Brian's first endeavor, or any of the Beach Boys' real first endeavor into the movies.
Right. So this is something that I came across in Mike Love's book when he talks about the comparison going back and forth between the Beach Boys and the Beatles, of how the Beatles orchestrated their career and how the Beach Boys did. He would really make light of what they were doing at the time, which was basically bumping into walls. There really was no format about how to do this stuff. Just as an example, the Beatles, their bass drum had their beautiful logo emblazoned on the front of it. Theirs was blank. The Beatles had every kind of merch under the sun, thermoses, lunchboxes, dolls, you name it. And in Mike's book, he says, we had a button that said, I know Brian's dad, that Murray would give out to people. You know, it's like they always came up a little bit short next to the Beatles. When Mike is talking about film careers, that goes in quotes, careers. You know, the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night is a classic. Yellow Submarine even is a classic. Help is a solid film, maybe not quite as good. And I happen to like the period psychedelic grandiosity of Magical Mystery Tour. And then, of course, Let It Be. There's some great stuff in their film career. The Beach Boys, all told, you have The Girls at the Beach, which is not none of them are really Beach Boys movies necessarily, but Girls on the Beach, The Monkey's Uncle, which is a chimpanzee with Annette Funicello, and this film, Muscle Beach Party. So I know you're stern on the fact that there are no Beach Boys movies, but tell me what Almost was.
Well, there was almost an American International Pictures Beach Boys movie. And that was going to be called Beach Boys Hawaiian Style. Just like Elvis Presley had Blue Hawaii, and Girls, Girls, Girls was also shot in Hawaii. And of course, later Elvis did Paradise Hawaiian Style and Aloha from Hawaii TV special. So he was very, very involved with Hawaii. The Beach Boys would have been a perfect, model for Hawaii. With Dennis Wilson could have even surfed in the movie. And there was a script that was written for this movie. And when it came down to brass tacks.
Have you read it?
No, I haven't seen the script. There's newspaper articles from industry trade magazines that discuss the script. Now, what ended up happening was American International Pictures, and I don't know why they did this ridiculously stupid move, but they tried to tell the Beach Boys that they wanted to keep the publishing and, the recording of these songs for the Beach Boys movie on their own, for their own thing. Just the way United Artists had the soundtrack to A Hard Day's Night for the Beatles, and in America there was no Beatles Hard Day's Night album other than the United Artists soundtrack. So too, American International wanted the rights to have the soundtrack to this Beach Boys movie. And the Beach Boys just said, no way are we going to do that. Now, our records come out on Capitol. They come out under the name of the Beach Boys, and that's that. That ended the movie deal.
Back then, things moved so unbelievably quickly. I mean, there's no better way of giving an example of what I mean by that than saying that in one night, Gary Usher, Roger Christian, and Brian Wilson got together, hanging out at the Revell House, and wound up writing 6 songs in one night. All right, that concludes your free sneak peek into today's Patreon episode. If you want to hear the rest of it, just visit patreon.com/discograffiti and either purchase this podcast by itself for $4, or better yet, subscribe at the major tier and get access to Discograffiti's 4 weekly episodes. That's Friday's free episode, the Sunday Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound episode, which showcases Patreon members and the Elephant Six world, your Monday bonus episode, and your Wednesday early release ad-free super extended director's cut of that Friday's show. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and 6-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not supporting Discograffiti. Become a member so you don't miss a single thing at patreon.com/discograffiti.